Okay, hello everyone. Thank you for joining. My name is Victoria Ciano. I'm the marketing coordinator with Atrion Communications, and I'd like to thank you for joining our newest installment of technical webinars. And this time we're featuring Pulse Secure. Before we get started, I want to point out at the bottom left-hand side of your screen that you are able to navigate between the content stage and the Q&A tabs. So we will be holding off on answering all questions until the end of the presentation, but if something comes to mind, please feel free to enter it into the question box. Okay, so today we are joined by Chris Hubert, who is the systems engineer at Pulse Secure, who will be performing the live demonstration and working together with Atrion solution engineer Dave Weir to show in real time the full capabilities of secure access. So at this time, I'm going to hand it over to Dave Weir to start us off and take us into the presentation. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Victoria. Hi, my name is Dave Ware. I'm one of the solutions engineers here at Atrion. So I'll dive into the presentation here for you. So you probably know Pulse Secure from Juniper or NetScreen or Neoterras even before that. Atrion has been partner of Pulse Secures for a little over 16 years. In October of 2014, Pulse Secure spun off from Juniper's Junos Pulse platform and with them became their own entity. At the same time, they acquired a BYOD mobile security company called Mobile Spaces, and we'll get into that in a little bit. But today, Pulse Secure has over 350 customers or 350 employees around the world. Revenues exceeding 100 million. Pulse is recognized by many of the marketing leaders as for secure access, giving you really like a leader aspect of full secure access across the board. So most people are familiar with the typical SSL VPN, right? So you have a traditional PC, desktop, home computer, something like that, and you VPN to a typical data center to get access to internal resources, whether you're home, whether you're remote, any of those kind of things. Well, the industry's changed a little bit because the environment now is, BYOD, right? You've got tablets, you've got phones, you've got laptops that are traversing anything from your home to your, Starbucks, Panera, airports, those kind of things. But not only has the access device changed, but also the resource devices changed. So we used to have typical data centers where everything was centralized and we had it all in one location. That's not really true anymore. Now we've moved to cloud, so you've got a lot of applications that are hosted elsewhere. So instead of being in one data center, it's now hosted between your own data center that you own, where you've got your internal networks and stuff, but you've got cloud applications like Office 365 or Salesforce or Box that are hosted elsewhere in the cloud, and your users still need access to those environments. So from there, Pulse Secure basically has evolved to accommodate everything, whether you're on site, whether you're remote, whether you're a traditional PC or a mobile device or tablet or Chromebook or any of those kind of things, or depending on where your resources are. So if your resources are in the data center or if they're in the cloud or both. A lot of the customers we're seeing now are what they call hybrid IT, which is a combination of your on-prem applications that are in your data center and your cloud applications such as 365, Salesforce, etc. So Pulse Secure has evolved to cover all of those aspects. So let's go through a typical scenario for Pulse Secure, right? So you've got your data center, which is typical data center. Everybody has where all your internal LAN things are. But then you've also got your cloud stuff. And then you've also got your headquarters, right? So this is a typical environment. Well, once we add in the Pulse client, we're able to really give you secure access across everything. So the Pulse client is really the linchpin for the secure access. It authenticates the user to the network. It checks the end device for compliance, whether it's running an AV, whether it's an approved device, if you use certificates or something along those lines, or if you can check for root or jailbreak. Maybe we don't want to allow those in. So make sure it's approved device. It also performs single sign-on. So if you have, if you set it up, you can have it do single sign-on to multiple different applications. Well, once we've checked and made sure the device is compliant, we can use that information to authenticate them to the wired or wireless network in your typical NAC fashion, right? So are they wireless? Are they wired? If they're compliant, then we can actually dynamically write ACLs onto firewalls um, to allow access to certain applications or disallow applications or those kind of things based off of what we know about the device, whether it's a mobile device, whether it's a corporate-owned asset, and then also the user as well. So if they're part of the IT group, they get certain privileges that maybe the sales group or HR doesn't get, along all those lines. So, well, what about the cloud applications? So now you've got to send, the user goes up and they're allowed access to the cloud applications if they're maybe part of, if you're doing Salesforce, if you're part of the sales team, you're allowed to get access to Salesforce, but maybe HR doesn't need access to that, so they're not allowed to have those kind of accesses. But we can also authenticate those users to those applications. So you've got that single sign-on from the user as soon as they get onto the network, seamlessly signing on to the cloud application or internal application, regardless of what it is. So then what about your remote offices? That's great if you've got the headquarters, but now we've also got users bouncing around to different offices. Well, it doesn't matter, because we can synchronize all those configurations and make sure they're all getting the same experience no matter where they are in any one of the on-prem offices. Or we can adjust those policies. So if you say, all right, well, if you're coming from the California office, you get a certain set of permissions, and if you're coming from the New Jersey headquarters, you get a different set or a very similar set of permissions, maybe slightly different. So what happens when the user goes home for the night? Well, typically they'd go home, they'd launch their VPN client to get an SLVPN in the data center, and then if they need to go to the cloud application, now they have to go through the data center into the cloud application. Well, do we really need to send them through our data center if they're just going back out to the internet again to get to that cloud application? Well, we could send them directly there, but what's the problem there? Well, most people see split tunneling as a security threat, and rightfully so. The big piece here is most people see split tunneling in the aspect of, well, I only set a predefined things that are tunneled and everything else is allowed. Well, with Pulse, we can actually reverse that logic and just say, okay, only things going to Office 365 are allowed direct access. Everything else must go through the data center. And with that, we still keep your security posture of anything going out is monitored by our IDS and our next gen firewalls and those kind of things, but we don't really need to send things that are going to Office 365 through our data center out there when we know where they're going, and they're going to our instance of 365. The other advantage we get here is we can only allow specific devices to get access to the cloud application. So, and that's the same for the SSL VPN as well. If we only want to allow corporate-owned assets to get access to the cloud applications, we can. And we can say, all right, you know what, mobile devices are not allowed access to those cloud applications. Or reverse that logic. Maybe I only want to allow my mobile devices to have access to 365 directly for ActiveSync, but any corporate-owned asset has to come to the data center first. However you want to build it, it's very granular in that aspect. And we're really focused on securing access, not about necessarily controlling the devices themselves. So how do we do that? Well, that's all done via the Pulse Access platform. You've got Pulse Secure and Policy Secure. So Connect Secure is your typical SSL VPN that everybody knows and loves from Juniper, from NetScreen, from Neoterras. Gives you the access to all of those, classic SSL VPN with the host checker and your resources and your granularity you get with the Connect Secure aspect. And then you've also got Policy Secure that gives you your on-prem security, just like a typical NAC, but we can pull in your Connect Secure rule base and policies and actually make that seamless for the users. So whether they're home or whether they're in the office, they get the same access no matter where they are in the network or where they're coming from, or based on off device. And then you've also added in Workspace, which is what we talked about previously with the mobile spaces acquisition. That gives you a dedicated access for a BYOD environment. So we can actually do things like containerization of apps to be able to make sure your corporate data stays enclosed in the workspace, but that also provides you your remote access for those apps that need it. So if you've got, I'll go back to 365 since it's one of the most common ones. If you've got Office 365 and we're concerned about email, we can actually containerize them, allow that single sign-on access to the cloud application, which Chris will actually demonstrate here shortly, but it'll still give you only those applications access to what they need to get access to without compromising the whole device like a typical MDM does. And then you've got Cloud Secure. So Cloud Secure gives you that same functionality in the cloud for single sign-on, secure access, but also identifying what devices are allowed to have access to the cloud and which ones aren't. And all of that is brought together by the Pulse One for a single point of management and visibility. So you really can get a single policy evaluation that you're able to do whether you're on-prem in the office, whether you're working from home, whether you're working on a corporate-owned device or a mobile BYOD device. You're able to build those and actually see all of that in a single pane of glass with Pulse One. So you really can see kind of the advantage here where you get the same policies across everything, whether you're on-prem, whether you're in headquarters, whether you're in a remote office, whether you're a corporate-owned device, mobile device, whether you're really, no matter where you are or what you're doing, you get the same policy evaluation as well as dynamic policy aspects to make sure that your security posture and your security policies as far as mobile access or device access is completely uniform, no matter where you are in the network or what device you're using from. So actually with that, I'll turn it over to Chris to show us a live demo.
Thanks, Dave. That was great. I appreciate the background and the laying the land for everybody. So I'm going to share my screen, and we're going to start off. We're going to demo two of the main products today. We're going to demonstrate Cloud Secure, and then we're going to demonstrate Workspace. Cloud Secure has obviously a mobile device platform perspective to it, but I think the sexier part of it is going to be the actual desktop. Dave, you can see my Windows desktop now, right?
Yes, I can.
Okay,
yes,
great. So we're going to start off. I've got a couple of bookmarks saved here, and we're going to start off by going to Office 365. Your typical user coming in the morning, the first thing they're going to do is connect to Office to check email and whatnot. You can see I've got this user that's here, Wilma Smith, and we've got a couple of test domains. So Pulse Secure SingleSignon.net is our test domain. And when I click on her name, you can see the wheels turning there already. And what's happening is it's getting a SAML redirect to a Pulse Connect Secure appliance. Now, typically, this is what most of our customers have for their VPN. And Cloud Secure runs on the Connect Secure appliance. It's either physical or virtual appliance, but it can be run on the same box. And typically, the Connect Secure appliance for a lot of our existing customers is already sitting inside of a DMZ somewhere. It has access to both the internal network and the external network, and that's really where it's best suited to be. The biggest feature for Connect Secure, and Dave Ware touched on this a little bit earlier, but it's not only a single sign-on experience. It is it's a single sign-on experience. I refer to it as being on steroids because it's not just the user that it's taking into account. It's not just Chris Hubert or Dave Ware. It's not what group we're in. It's that plus the device that we're coming from. And you can see here that the Office 365 login session, it redirected me to the Connect Secure appliance. And I have a host checker policy set host checker is our nomenclature for a posture assessment. That posture assessment could be anything from a domain joined machine, it could be a device certificate, it could be any antivirus software on there whatsoever. The breadth of what we can check for is quite great. So personal firewalls, disk encryption. I mean, if we're looking at antiviruses, you can look for the latest. You can make sure it has the latest virus definitions and that a full system scan has run in the last, X number of days. It can also look for a process, and this is what I use in my lab just to show host checker either passing or failing. But you can see here that it requires that notepad.exe be running in order to be compliant. So if I just run notepad, come on, sorry, typo, notepad. Notepad kicks off, and then I hit try again. And this is now going to pass the posture assessment and redirect me to the login page. The login page is just going to prompt me for my username and password. This can be either single factor or multi-factor. We can either point just to Active Directory or LDAP. We can point to Active Directory and RSA or Duo or SecureAuth. Any number of these multi-factor solutions are also an option. But here I'm just going to type in good old-fashioned Wilma Smith. I'm going to type in her password, and I am now going to not remember her password. But now I'm going to get redirected back to Office 365. And you can see the URL changed a couple of times, and that was essentially SAML running its magic. And I'm signed in as Wilma, and I now get to the landing page. So I went through the authentication process. I went through host checker at that point, and I'm now in. So I can now, browse to mail or whatever. The SAML assertion's taken place. And I now have access to Office 365 as Wilma Smith. It's opening my inbox. Everything runs smoothly. So now let's say, okay, so now I'm going to go over here. I'm going to open up another tab. And one of the other applications that I might use as an end user is Salesforce. Salesforce is going to kick off. You can either log in as a general old username and password, or you can see here down at the bottom, I have Cloud Secure configured. And for Salesforce, you have options. You can offer only username and password. You can offer only Cloud Secure, or you can offer both, which is what we have here for our lab purposes. For most of our customers, they're going to hide the typical username and password fields on the top and only offer Cloud Secure. So as I click on Cloud Secure, you'll notice that nothing else had to run. I didn't have to authenticate. I didn't have to run host checker again. Connect Secure, the Pulse Connect Secure appliance, has created that session for me as soon as I logged in. Now, in my example here, I'm quote unquote your typical remote user. I'm not sitting on premise. But if I was, and Pulse Secure was also being used to authenticate the workstation to the network, that first posture assessment wouldn't have even run. The posture assessment would have been run as the machine was being booted for the very first time and being put on the network. So a remote user has one extra step than an on-premise user, but you can see it was still pretty seamless to that end user. The third example that I've got prepared today is Box. So if I flip over to yet another tab, I go to my bookmarks page and I launch Box. Again, I'm going to be redirected and authenticated with the SAML assertion automatically. So I've typed in my username and password once. I got posture assessed once. But from there, I'm able to go back and forth between any number of cloud-based applications. The next thing that I'd like to show you, I'm going to flip back over to my Mac. I'm going to share my phone. Okay. Dave, can you just confirm that you can see my phone now?
Yep. Yeah, we can see it.
Great. Okay. So Pulse Workspace supports not only iOS, which is what I'm going to show you today, but it also supports Android and Android for Work. On your typical iOS device, iPad or iPhone, you're going to find our settings all in the same spot. So if I scroll down a little bit and I go to General, I scroll down to the bottom and I go to Device Management, you're going to see the Pulse Secure profile. The Pulse Secure profile consists of a few different controls that we've put in place. You can see down at the bottom, we have one email account, we've got 6 managed applications, and we have 4 restrictions. Let's start with the restrictions. There are 3 restrictions, excuse me, there are 4 restrictions that we take on almost all devices. The first one, and I'm going to start from the bottom on this particular screen here, but the passcode. The passcode is very important, and that is the only device-wide control that we assume. We take ownership of a password policy because we have the ability to install certificates, certificates for to authenticate to the VPN, certificates to authenticate for applications and things like that. And at the very least, you want to ensure that your employees have a passcode that is suitable to your requirements. But that's the only device-wide control that we have. We don't have access to the GPS. We don't have access to the browser history or the camera. We don't even have access to remote wipe the entire device. We leave that to the end user. Now, the example that people are usually concerned about is the employees lost their phone, they left it in a taxi or whatever. It would become the organization or the company's responsibility to delete and remove the workspace. And you're going to do that immediately. As soon as the phone is reported as missing, you're going to wipe out that workspace. The personal side of the device is left to the discretion of the employee. They own the device. It's their responsibility to wipe their pictures or account information or whatever. But everything else is up to them. We control that workspace, which leads me to the top 3 restrictions. So the first one is the ability to open documents from the managed space to the unmanaged space is blocked. So any corporate document or data cannot be opened outside of the workspace. And then the second one is a similar rule, but for iBooks. So corporate books can't be opened outside. And then finally, unmanaged documents can't be opened into the managed space. So this typically, again, prevents anybody from opening a personal document or something that hasn't been scanned or whatever into the workspace and corrupting the workspace. So the profile, the apps that we've installed, here I've got 6 apps installed. Pulse Workspace has a concept of required apps and optional apps. And these rules can be determined on a group basis. So I can take groups out of Active Directory and I can say, okay, the executives have these 3 apps that are required and these 5 apps that are optional. Salespeople, HR, IT, whatever. I can create these rules based on those kinds of groups from Active Directory or any LDAP source. And then the account is actually getting pre-configured. So you can see here, we are an Office 365 customer. This is my real phone that I use for my everyday use, not just for demos. But this is my email account. And then finally, what I'll show you is underneath more details, you can see some more information. We've got some app layer VPN settings. We've got some managed domains, and this one is a very interesting one. So if I pull up Safari and I go to psecure.net or pulsesecure.net, it's automatically going to launch the VPN tunnel. So if somebody sends me an email with a link inside of it, and I click on that link, and that's an internal link, it will automatically launch the VPN. You can see that I've got certificates that have been installed. I've got CAs that have been installed. And then again, the per app Safari domains are listed under there as well. Now, what's really interesting about the whole process is that if I slide over here, these are all the corporate applications. There's no difference between them. They look exactly the same to the end user. They are native applications being installed directly from either the iTunes Store or Google Play. Now, if I do launch the Pulse Secure app, the Pulse Secure app has kind of two personalities to it. The first personality is it is a VPN client. So if you are a Connect Secure customer and you're not a Workspace customer, the Pulse Secure client still comes into play for those users that are VPNing into the network. And it is also the MDM, which is where the Workspace apps comes in. You can see here that these are all of the optional applications. Any of these applications, if I installed, for example, the Firefox browser, it would automatically become a managed app. So anything to and from the Firefox browser would in fact be in the managed space. And then again, the installed apps, these are the apps that I actually have installed. The next thing that I wanted to show you is underneath the email. We are doing all of this, again, I've mentioned this earlier, but not only through the native third-party apps, but through the native Mac Apple apps as well. Here I've just searched for an email that I've kind of sent myself for testing purposes. I've got this one email, and you can see here that where it says it's found in KH-Tech sent mail. This is my personal email. If I took this email and I forwarded it, I want to include the attachment. I can actually change the from address to any one of my personal accounts. You'll notice the one missing here is pulsesecure.net. If I wanted to open the presentation or the Word document, excuse me, and I wanted to share it, I can open that document in Messages, in Mail, in iBooks, in the Health app. I don't know why I would want to open a Word document in the Health app, but Dropbox, Box, so on and so forth. Now, the other example that I have here is a confidential email. And this email, you can see here it's found in the Pulse Secure sent mailbox. And this email, I don't have the same ability. So if I wanted to forward this email, again, I'm going to include the attachments. But notice the from address is missing here. I can't send this email using any of my phone's accounts except for Pulse Secure. That's the only one I'm allowed to use for it. I'm going to hit cancel. I'm going to then open up the PowerPoint presentation. Signs you've had too much coffee. And then I'm going to share it. And notice here that all of those other applications are gone. Dropbox is gone, text is gone, email is gone. They're all gone except for WebEx and Hub, which is our marketing tool that we use. We've created a container for not only the applications, but for any email that comes in and out of the corporate email account. That becomes very important for data loss prevention. Any questions? Victoria, are there any questions on the board?
Not at this time, but definitely everybody use this time. If you have any questions, to enter it into the question box, just press enter and we can answer it for you. All right, Chris, so far we're good.
Okay. The last thing I'm going to show is, so I can type it correctly. Oh, actually, you know what? Yeah, I'm in the right spot. Sorry, I got distracted for a second. The next thing I'm going to show is the admin interface for Pulse Workspace. Pulse Workspace is a component of Pulse One. David mentioned earlier that Pulse One is our central management interface. It not only is used to manage the mobile devices, but it's used to manage Connect Secure and Policy Secure as well. If I log into Pulse One as an admin, here you're going to see a lot of the appliance-based information. If I click over here on the workspaces, you can see all of the different statistics that I've got here. I've got 137 total users. I've got 91 total spaces being used. I've got 29 non-compliant workspaces. These are typical, SEs that add and remove their phones like I do. And then expired sessions is also considered a non-compliant session. That's why those two numbers match. But the phones haven't checked in X number of days, so it becomes a non-compliant device. In the dashboard, you can really easily see all of the different types of devices, OSs, carriers, and manufacturers that are there with a nice little pie chart for visibility purposes. But if I look at the actual management aspect of it, I go over to workspaces, and now I'm looking at the devices. I'm going to search for my own device. And here I have two devices. I've got an iPad and a Nexus 6. If I look at the iPad, these are the apps that I'm requiring for my policy. And you can see here, and I am one of those examples. I am marked as non-compliant because my iPad has since been unregistered from our lab space and registered into our production space. So this shows as non-compliant. But you can see Duo, Opera Mini Browser, the Pulse Secure Client, and our HR application are all required apps. Underneath the Motorola policies or the Nexus policies, I've got Chrome, I've got Divide, I've got our expense application, and again, the Opera Mini Browser, the Pulse Client, and TriNet Mobile. You'd set up your policies in a few different ways. You'd have a global policy, which would have all sorts of app settings, so either Android or iOS apps, and then finally policies or properties. These properties are where you'd configure some of those device settings. The password length and history and whatnot are there. I'm actually going to just look at the iOS stuff. But you'd also find here the managed domains. Here's iOS managed domains is Acme Gizmo in our lab. And then you'll see our Office 365 settings here for the active sync settings. So all of this gets pre-configured inside of Pulse Workspace when it gets installed. The next one is individual policies. Now, I've created my own policy here on the left. I think, is it not here? Oh, my policy's gone. Oh, well, I will show somebody else's policy then. So underneath the global policy, we have several individual policies. Now, these can be done by username or they can be done by group. Now, remember that we can authenticate the user to Connect Secure. We can pull groups from Active Directory or LDAP, and then those groups can be used for policies here as well. So any user or group of users can have their own policies here. Finally, the app catalog allows you to add apps to the managed workspace. And it allows you to pre-configure those apps as well. We support the app config standard. So basically through an XML file, you can pre-configure almost any app in the App Store. As you push this app down, you can specify things like usernames or destination servers or certificates for passwords or whatever you could think of. Underneath the iOS, and then we have Salesforce. Underneath Salesforce, here as an example is where you would upload the app config XML. This XML is very straightforward of whatever the um, application developer allows you to configure, you're essentially pushing down to the device during the time of the install. And again, keep in mind, there are required apps and there are optional apps. Not everybody wants the same apps on their phone. And I'll give you a perfect example. My colleagues in Europe, we are both in the sales organization, but we have different expense apps. So if we made the expense app required, I would have to have the European app and the Europeans would have to have the American app. By making the apps optional, both of the apps are optional, and then I just download the one that I need, and then they download the one that they need. If your organization is a little bit more sophisticated than Pulse Secure is, and you have groups based on geos, you could do that automatically. But our sales organization doesn't have a concept of geo, so we do that manually at Pulse Secure. But any number of apps can be installed on a mobile device and created with or configured with Pulse Workspace. Victoria, I'm going to pass it back to you to see if there's any more questions or if there's anything you want me to dive into deeper.
Excellent, Chris. Thank you so much. I am just going to put the presentation back on. And yeah, at this time, I'd just like to open it up to any questions. So I will give it a couple minutes. If anybody has anything, feel free to type it into the question box and press enter, and we will answer it verbally for you. All right, so at this time, I do not see any questions. So Dave, anything else to add?
I don't have anything.
Great. Well, thank you so much, both Dave Ware and Chris Hubert. Excellent sessions. Thank you for all the information and sharing this with us.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you. And everyone, most of you know Dave Ware and myself. I've reached out to all of you. So if any questions come to mind later on, feel free to pass them along to me or Dave, and I can get those questions answered for you or directed to either Dave or Chris. All right, and thank you everyone for joining once again. Okay, have a great day, everyone.